Hey folks, it is January the 22nd, and today we're going over chapters 111 and chapter 112 out of our book. And that, of course, has to do with kind of like the birth of astronomy and some of the scientific method we're going to talk about later on. But also, it's going to talk about the end of serfdom. We might call changes in labor and wages during the end of the Middle Ages and the beginning of the Renaissance. Okay, so we're going to start in just a couple minutes.
So basically, serfdom kind of fell out. Economic reasons, because the Lord found out that it was best for them to hire people rather than
I see. Somebody told me it looks like the king off Shrek. Yeah. I don't remember that.
Why can I taste it more than I feel like you have cancer?
He does love it.
Yes. Hey, there's Simon. All right, kids. So before I start calling you up here to start filling in these fine notes for us, which are super cool. What, you don't want to?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, great. Well, we'll get there.
We would do that.
All right. So let me show you the images I have first, real quick. So yeah, this is Copernicus. And so Copernicus is famous for, like we talked a little bit about Ptolemy earlier, because Ptolemy is who we consider the founder of astrology. Well, astrology, the way that it's practiced throughout a lot of ages, and even kind of today, if you look at that section of the newspaper. Well, a lot of Ptolemaic principles were that the Earth is the center of the universe, and that the stars and the planets and stuff like that revolved around the sun. Not the sun, but the Earth. So it's a geocentric universe. Hey guys. And so he proved that the Earth is actually one of many planets, and it rotated around the sun. Whereas essentially, like ancient people and astrologers thought of other planets such as Jupiter and Mars as simply other kind like special stars. I mean, they kind of look like stars. You can look at them. So here's a rough sketch of what he thought it was like. So here you have, of course, the Sun, Mercury, Venus. Terra, that's the Earth. Mars, so on and so forth. So what? Marcus, yeah.
Mr. Wagner,
What's that?
your live stream is off from the actual.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's like 2 seconds off.
There's a delay. Yeah. Well, that makes sense. I mean, when you think about it, it has to send and receive. All right. So here's another image of his depiction of what he called the known universe. So all going around the sun, but in perfect circles. Kepler, is going to Galileo, is going to invent the first telescope. And after he invents the telescope, there's going to be a lot of people throughout history who's going to take this up as hobbies. They're going to have special glass made into tubes with different kinds of refractions, stuff like that, so that they can get better zooms or magnifications. And so stargazing is going to become a really big pastime. But the thing is like looking up at the stars at night has been a big thing for a lot of societies for a very long time. I mean, when you think about like pre-electricity, people's day generally ended whenever the sun went down. It got cold, it got dark. Having sources of light for reading was expensive, like candles, oil, and things like that. So, yeah. Of course, here's his depiction of the universe. And as you can see, you have the day-night cycle as well. So he has like maps of what he thought was the known world at the time as the Earth is rotating. But of course, you see there's also still principles of astrology here. So like they kind of thought that there were still some principles to it that could be kept. Kepler is, of course, going to be credited with helping show that these are not just planets, but they have gravitational pulls as well. And their gravitational pull is what makes these orbits a slight elliptical. So it's not a perfect circle. So like for example, like Jupiter and Saturn are pulling on one another. And of course pulling on Mars, for example. So not all of these bodies are being pulled towards the sun. They're also being pulled against each other as well, which is kind of throwing off their orbits. All right, so this guy here, Vesalius. Vesalius was he was a very well educated in his time young man in Spain for medicine. But throughout European countries, and this had been true all the way back in the Roman days, even the pagan Roman days, they had bans on human dissection. Whenever somebody passed away, you buried them, you cremated them. Well, there was one form of execution, however, that was pretty popular during this time. So if somebody was caught for like a high crime and sentenced to death in Spain, such as large theft or murder or something of that, they would be put inside of a cage and hung up in the cage and starved to death. Or they would be hung and left there to essentially have the birds pick at them. Vesalius, ever since he was a young man, his favorite pastime was to go up and look at these bodies. And he would look at them as they rotted and as birds picked them apart. And so he was probably a super creepy, weird guy. But he learned a lot about anatomy doing that, oddly enough. One day, the King of Spain, his wife has a lady in waiting, and she's deathly ill. But everybody loved this lady in waiting. I don't remember her name. And the king put out a reward for anyone who could figure out a way to cure this girl. Vesalius managed to make it, but he was there too late and she died. And so he got the king's permission to find out what killed her. He did a dissection and he found that what killed the girl was a corset. Girls wore, corsets, right? They're like belt thing that really cinches in here. They wore them so tight it deformed their organs. And he was like, look, these things are killing these girls. You're like their kidneys and their livers are like smushed. And you can't live like that. And so the King of Spain banned them throughout the kingdom. And all of a sudden, rich people's health got better. So he's known as being like the father of anatomy. Right? Even though in a different life, he probably would have been a serial killer. All right. All right. So the Black Death. We talked a little bit about this in the past. The Black Death is, of course, the bubonic plague, which is named after these giant black zits called buboles that would burst on people and had stinky smells coming out of it. A very high death rate, possibly up to 50% of Europe's population died of it. So think of it like really, 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 really deadly. This is going to cause a massive labor shortage because so many people died, but there was still so much work to be done to reap food and build things, stuff like that, that all of a sudden people needed peasants. And so they were willing to pay peasants more to do work because everybody needed the few peasants that were left. It's also going to lead to more inventions that are labor-saving devices, such as water mills and windmills and things like that are able to use forms of energy instead of having teams of peasants do certain things. better uses of crane operated material and things like that, more automated looms. And so it's going to be a horrendous thing. It's going to like be very destructive on the psyche of the European people. But at the same time, it kind of helped end serfdom. They believe this disease was spread by the fleas that went on rats that were infected with it. The rats were largely unaffected by the disease, whereas human beings, it was very devastating. Europeans had no immunity to this plague. There had been many plagues already throughout Europe. The Greeks had plagues, Romans had plagues. There were plagues before this throughout the medieval times, but none so deadly and widespreading like this. Later on, we're going to see that Europeans are going to get rid of this through two things. One thing is we call herd immunity. Enough people who survive it pass on their resistance over generations. The other is called quarantine. And so what European cities would do, since it mostly spread through the cities, is if a city came up with a case of the plague, the king would send in the army and totally wall off the city. Nobody in or out for like 2 months. And whoever survives can come out. And then that eventually got rid of the plague. So this was something that was most especially devastating on Europe's hospitals. And it managed to kill the highest death rate was actually in the clergy, monks, nuns, and priests who tended to the sick. So people who went and gave their last prayers over people, or who ran the hospitals, which were religious orders, died the most because they were around infected people the most. So this was very devastating on the church and a lot of the infrastructure. You're going to see a lot of people. This is going to come up with the rise of an end of the world following, right? Called millennialism, because tradition holds that at the end of the millennium, Christ will come and it'll be the end of the world, is what they thought. And so you would have these groups of people who called themselves flagellants, because, it has nothing to do with gas. It has to do with whipping, the Latin word for whipping. And so they would wear dunce hats, carry crosses, and flog each other, hoping to somehow appease God, because they saw the plague as essentially divine punishment for being a sinful people. Of course, popular artwork had a lot to do with the dance of death. It was a dance that everyone danced, regardless if you're rich, poor, good, or evil. It didn't seem to matter. Nothing seemed to stop the plague. And it just seemed super random to these people. This is before the age of germ theory. So it was like anybody could get it. And you're probably going to die if you get it. And it was very devastating because it could be like everyone from the young to the old. Of course, plague doctors at this time would go around attempting to use what remedies they had in pre-scientific era medicine. A lot during this time. Yeah, there's Kelby. So during this time, people thought that illness came from one of two places. It was either what they called an imbalance of your body fluids, such as different biles and blood, which is going back to ancient Greek philosophy, or they thought you caught it from inhaling something called miasma. Essentially, people thought certain smells could make you sick. And so plague doctors would put essentially like herbs and potpourri at little beaks of these things. And they were hoping that through inhaling air that smelled fresher through these, they were less likely to get sick.
Did that work though?
Well, since it came from fleas, it depends on if they had fleas or not. I mean, they completely covered themselves, which was pretty smart. Here's Thomas More, which your chapter mentioned a little bit. And so, yeah, Thomas More, we're going to talk about him later on. We'll talk about the Protestant Revolution. He's going to be a friend of King Henry VIII until King Henry VIII goes crazy and starts chopping people's heads off, including his. But he's going to write something called Utopia. And Utopia was essentially a satire against the idea that you could make a perfect society. It's like, that's a human impossibility. People can make the best countries and governments they can, and it's never going to be perfect. So here's a map of utopia, and that's going to end that. So, oh yeah, and of course we had John Ball. John Ball was essentially a social revolution against just the English government trying to limit how much money that poor people could make. All right, so we got our terms up on the board. We got Copernicus, Galileo, Kepler, Vesalius, the end of serfdom, the Black Death, and John Ball. First, why not start in order? So hey guys, can y'all put up on the board what we've learned about Copernicus? And I will read it off.
Can you go back to that first guy,
Copernicus?
Yes.
In a minute, I want to give them the platform.
I'm just.
Yeah, sure, go ahead, bring it. All right.
See the representation?
Yes, that's him. All right. So, yeah, founder of modern astronomy. Yes, that is Copernicus. Lived in Italy. No. I'm trying not to show students on the camera. I'm touching myself. Go away.
I thought you.
Go away.
Thought you accidentally.
I know what I'm doing. So wrote a book. Okay. Inspired by ancient Greeks. Yep, that's true. Hey, good job. Yeah, so founder of modern astronomy, but you forgot one thing. He found that the Earth goes around the sun, remember?
No.
Okay, yeah, but that's what that's like his most biggest thing that he discovered. All right, now Galilei. There you go.
This takes two people to write.
Well, those are heavy markers.
So.
Whatever you want. First person to
Make, put, invent.
make. Yeah, make's fine. We got it. First to make it, you probably invented it. Make telescope. Correct.
Telecate.
Spelling.
And he.
Oh, it's all there. It's all there.
Disagree.
And then it was as powerful
He
as
found
the
the
Yeah, which is kind of like a cheap
Dollar Tree.
$5, yeah, like monocular, right? You know, just like
He found
like that kind of scope you put on a cheap BB gun.
I've done that.
Yes.
And he found the sun unmistakably moving on an axis.
You found what?
The sun unmistakably moving on an axis.
So if you found the sun, let's just say that.
He found that the sun is not
No, they already knew the sun was there.
moving on an axis, though.
Yes, that was on its own axis. Yeah, and that's the weird thing about the sun. The sun
And he
has
found that the
seasons
Milky Way
and
was
stuff like that
just a
too.
bunch of
It's weird.
stars. Wait, it has seasons?
And not seasons like the way we think about it. It has like seasons for things like
Access?
Yeah,
like we think like solar storms and
yes,
stuff
he's
like
not moving
that.
on an axis.
It has like a rainy season, but it's raining fire.
Yeah, I guess you could say that raining outward.
And the Milky Way was composed of multiple stars.
Alondra.
What? You can't see it. Move up.
I'm sorry. I was
That's the
thinking.
difference.
Get up.
Usually what counts is they're paying attention.
You better go there right
That's what counts.
I was thinking, I'll give it.
The Milky Way.
Oh, I got you.
Many stars.
Yes.
Yeah, there you go. Yep. And we are in the Milky Way. I mean, our solar system is part of it. So you can see other parts of it though. Because it's so big, you're in it, but you can see a lot of it. It's kind of like being in the ocean and
What if
looking at
we
the
went
ocean.
outside of?
Hmm?
If it was
Yeah.
outside.
We have.
If you wrote really
Then I guess we'd have to
small.
get her.
I really don't know. The
First
thing is,
person to
though,
make a telescope.
It's real.
I think they think just outside the Milky Way, there's just a lot of meteors and stuff. I
What is
mean,
that?
That's opera blast.
Opera blast, okay.
Why is it, oh, I like it.
Found the
Then
sun
that's
I'll
the
bet
thing.
you
was moving on a axis.
Yeah, it will take.
we're trying. We're doing all right. Y'all did great, guys. Thank you very much. Hey, Kepler, please. Kepler.
Yeah, no, humans literally
So Johann Kepler, which, you know, like the famous Kepler telescope, is named after, which is taking really cool pictures.
even make it halfway through. We're not there.
Because it would take them over maybe.
I would like to be sitting in a pod.
Well, you wouldn't know it.
Know it. So like half a second. Like, no, I'm talking about. It's like going to sleep. And we go.
Mm.
You'd have to wake up.
So, then we go.
Oh, hey, I'm halfway across the nation. I'm 50 years old. I'm 50 years older. I'm in my mid-70s.
No one.
All right, so Kepler, a German genius who founded/discovered the principle of gravitation. Yeah, right. And of course,
You guys.
we know that's going to be deeply refined by Sir Isaac Newton. You know, as he principles of gravitational pull on Earth. Hey, Vesalius, right? Vesalius. So good old Vesalius. Oh, that's right. He's still part of the Holy Roman Empire. That's what it was. So Fleming, which is like kind of like Netherlands studying place, studied in Italy. So he was into dissection and became founder of human anatomy. Yeah, and that's what's weird. It's like dissections is one of those things that had been like kind of banned, but kind of done all the time. Even like in early American history, like some of our first colleges, professors would go out and pay people to dig up corpses illegally so they could dissect them. So pretty horrifying. All right, so the end of serfdom.
No.
All right, so y'all can help each other out. I mean, one write, one speak if you want. What is that, Hunter? Okay. All right. So there was a lot of things that they went on about in serfdom. Like, yeah, just get a couple. That'd be good.
So basically, they found it was better to just hire people.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's going to be the same as like one of the reasons why slavery, one of the many reasons why slavery was criticized in the American South, is they were like, you know that people who are enslaved don't work hard because they don't like you and they don't like doing this, being forced. And it was true. A lot of times they didn't. Whereas when you pay people, they work harder. Money is one of the strongest incentives out there. So you can do so much with it. Tell them how to falling and falling out. Sure. Yes, sir. So because of a growing serfdom. Serfdom had a falling out because of a growing economy. Yeah. Like nobles were like, hey, money works really good. Maybe I should start making money. And the serfs were like, I like money too. I want to start making money. And the lords found out that it was better for them to hire people. Yeah. And that's absolutely true. I mean, and medieval lords hated their serfs because the serfs barely did, because they had no incentive to work hard. You had to work all day, but you didn't get anything out of that. So you might as well just be lazy about it. Hey, very good. So to hire people to do their work rather than to have serfs. That's true. Yeah, impressed people don't work hard. It's the same with soldiers, right? Whenever you have the draft, like in war, people forced to be in like soldiers. They just want to get. They don't want to be in that position. They just want to get out. So volunteers and paying people works out. The Black Death.
Telescope on you.
Big and then I'm small. That's just
Yep, the bubonic plague. Yeah, caused black spots all over their bodies. Yeah.
The baby.
Yeah, not the babies. Well, okay, yeah, the babies too, but which is very sad.
As long as it's not baby going in the body.
Oh yeah, yeah. It doesn't make you like bud like a sponge, you know, or the thing's called hydros.
I said he's fine.
Spread by ventilation, bad drainage, and now they think yes, flea-borne illness. So. No immunity. No, we're really ahead of last year. That's like really awesome. Like these kids in my 9th grade class and you kids in 10th grade. Wait, y'all are in my 9th grade class. Yeah, we were going over this stuff on the board in 9th grade the week after spring break when we had the COVID shut down. So like we were like, and same here. Like we were going over this stuff right after so we're like a month ahead. We're doing awesome. So cool stuff. Which means like if we can get through all the content, like we can use the rest of the school year. I'm gonna come up. I want us to do some projects and stuff. Hey, John Ball, last one. Hello, John Ball. You hear that thing about Adam and Eve?
You found it, you contributed to this. Right.
Being fair.
Not everybody else. I just mentioned.
Well, if we had time, I'd show you a video about you might play, but it's gonna have to wait till next week because of the clock, the universe. You might want to put it under his name so that the podium isn't completely in the way. Thank you very much for your patience.
What was I? Okay.
Mm-hmm. Help inspire rebellion. Where?
And
England. In England. That's right. That is correct. Got it. Merry old England. They weren't too merry that day. No.
Those are not complete sentences.
it's
Whoa.
just bullet points.
He was a wandering priest. Okay, yeah. So it's okay.
I don't know.
What? Ariel? What?
That's what we preach about. That's what we preach about.
Well, why did they have a rebellion?
That's a great question.
Yeah, it is a great question. That's why I asked it. But you're gonna have a great answer. You're gonna have a great answer.
No, he was.
He wanted rights for and
H-U-N-G, hunger.
There was discontent after the statute of labor.
No,
Yeah, he- what it was about the statute of labors was they limited how much money poor people could make. So he was fighting for the rights for the poor. So he's fighting for the rights of the poor. He's like, you just can't, like, instead of a minimum wage, they had a maximum wage. So they were like, hey, you can only, I know you're working hard, but you can only make like $1 an hour. So, okay, there you go. You're welcome. We don't want you getting rich because then you might get all uppity.
And then he was hanged.
Yeah,
Yeah,
they were
they-
the ones that were.
They executed him.
But
And
then
that
he was
was- Hanged? Maybe. Okay.
He was hung.
Yeah.
In English tradition, only nobility and royalty could be beheaded. A hanging was what everybody else got. So.
I thought it would
And,
have been the other way around. But they wanted to destroy the other people.
well, a beheading was seen as humane because
Which
it was
is rebellion, buddy.
almost
I was
always
about
quick.
that.
Whereas a hanging, you might struggle or it might pop your neck. You're not sure. It depends on how
You won't
the
go out.
hangman
You
does
won't
it.
go
It could be slow or fast.
That's why, like, you'll find, like in like the old West days, they would have the gallows made at a certain height because it was intended to break the neck. Because they kind of wanted it to be humane, but not super nasty and gross, kind of like a beheading. Yeah, it's supposed to be more humane. Kids, it's going to end our lecture for today. I'll post the notes and yesterday's notes too. I haven't posted those yet. So, thank you, oh faithful of students.